We'll get started now. So, good evening, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm James Mahalsick, and so I live on North Superior Road in Stanton Township with my wife, Karen. And I was an environmental engineering professor at Michigan Tech for almost 20 years. So I'm here today as the secretary of the Guardians of Keweenaw Ridge. We have two items we want to cover this evening. So first, we're going to spend about 20 minutes and update you on what's going on regarding the proposal to install 12 575-foot industrial wind turbines in Stanton and Adams Township. And then we want to let you know how you can help, and maybe you'll also get some of your neighbors or mom, aunt, uncle, niece, or nephew to help out. And then we're really here for our guest speaker. So our guest speaker is going to talk about birds and bats that inhabit or pass along the Keweenaw Ridge. And we'll have time afterwards to socialize and answer questions you might have. So we'll also have a few comments between me and the speaker from our president, Charles Marco, and our treasurer, Andy Vanderbilt. And board members will be available to chat after activities. Could the board members of the Guardians stand up? Okay, so the nonprofit Guardians of Keweenaw Ridge was only formed in late June. We're financed by small donations from people like you. We consist of residents of Stanton and Adams Township and concerned Copper Country residents. The Stanton Township website says, "Welcome to Stanton Township, a place to call home." You know, for us, our home is not just our physical structure that we dine and sleep in, but it's also places we hang out with families and friends, go to church or school, places we garden, hunt, fish, boat, and berry pick. The wind developer, Circle Power is a company of 3 individuals. This is not their home. They are a subsidiary of a Texas company, and they are financed by wealthy people out of London. They are taking advantage of using our hard-earned wages, some that are paid as federal income tax, to enrich themselves while ruining our home. And as the famous investor Warren Buffett explained when he was asked about industrial wind turbines, we get a tax credit if we build a lot of wind farms. That's the only reason to build them. They don't make sense without the tax credit. I get asked a lot how many turbines, and so we're told by the developer there's only be 12, but we know this is just the beginning and they're planning to establish a foothold in Keweenaw. This is because plans are already in place to update our transmission lines to accommodate more power from industrial wind. And you probably did not know this, but in Michigan's thumb, they started with a couple dozen turbines in 2008, and now they have 836 turbines. Since June, we have worked to inform local residents about this plan and issue, and also our local elected leaders. Don't be fooled by Circle Power and the wind industry. Our website, which is based on all factual information, shows that these turbines will not improve our children's education at local schools. It will only create 1 or 2 permanent jobs, and these are for outsiders, not for our children. It will not result in a lower bill from UPCO. It will lower the value of your property, and thus the tax collected by Stanton and Adams Townships. It will cause sleep disruption and other health issues for many of us and our friends, and it will harm wildlife. The wind industry is also full of false promises on local tax revenue. They are proven to consistently go to the state tax commission to have their assessed values lowered. This causes local township and school districts to have to pay back already collected and spent revenues. In terms of our power being green or not, UPCO already meets Michigan's renewable portfolio standard requirement with renewable hydropower. And 89% of that hydropower that UPCO uses for their electricity generation comes from the Upper Peninsula. So, what did the decision by EGLE mean? As many of you know, on July 30th, the State of Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE, they denied Circle Power's environmental permit application. This does not mean the fight to protect our homes is over. This is because Circle Power has a legal right to appeal, and they may also submit a new application or move to another location. And they've told us that they have other sites in mind, and if you look at their permit to the state. They refer to other sites in Gratiot Lake and Toivola. So, what do the Guardians do and how can you help? First, we attend monthly township and county meetings. Please, please do this. The Stanton board meets every Monday. The Stanton board meets the first Wednesday of each month. The Adams Township board meets the first Monday. And both meetings are at 6 p.m. And an important thing is, Adams Township is holding a special meeting this Wednesday at 6 in Baltic Hall. It's on the east side of the town of South Range. And they're going to consider a moratorium for industrial wind turbines. And one of the reasons is at their last township meeting, they said they would consider it if Stanton Township did it. Okay, we were able to organize an event last month where 120 people gathered in the South Range Elementary School. We heard Kevin Vortices speak about common sense ways to regulate industrial wind turbines. And these common sense ways would allow us to keep doing what we do, what I call business as usual on our property and at our home, but regulate things that harm our cultural, historical, economic, and environmental well-being. We'll have his talk on our website shortly, and we'll inform you all that you can listen to it if you're unable to attend. We have an active Facebook page. It has close to 700 members. We recently launched a website that is full of material on issues that concern all of us. And like I said, all the web material is based on referenced facts. We hired an attorney, and it'll let local officials know he is available to assist at our cost. We also used our attorney to develop a document for Stanton and Adams Township board members, and this explained why a moratorium was legal and why they should not be afraid of threats of lawsuits from any wind developer. We are supportive of Stanton Township Board passing a 9-month moratorium. And if you're not aware, this is a moratorium on establishment, placement, construction, enlargement, and or erection of wind energy conversion systems within the township. It's also a moratorium on issue of permits, licenses, and approvals regarding wind energy conversion systems. We are also supportive of the Township Board to establish a planning commission, and I would like to reiterate, we are supportive of common sense land use regulations like Kevin Morris discussed, which means business as usual for current residents. Now, something very important for Stanton Township registered voters. So, wake up. You might not be aware, but the Stanton Township Supervisory Board are sending out, we think this week, all registered voters a survey. And you will be asked to provide your opinion on if you're supportive of installing 575-foot industrial wind turbines in our township. It is very critical that we reply with a large number and a strong vote of no to industrial wind turbines. And it makes sure your neighbors, friends, moms and dads, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles all submit their surveys as well. If you need help delivering a survey, please contact us. I have stamps. And if you are not registered to vote in Stanton Township, please see me afterwards. I can guide you on how to do it. Okay, I mentioned the important meeting this Wednesday at 6 p.m. in Adams Township in Baltic Hall. So Adams Township will also consider a moratorium. And one of the reasons for this is several turbines are right on the Adams-Stanton Township border. So we need to show up at the meeting to voice our support for such a moratorium and let elected officials know in Adams Township that the community is behind them. And I told you before, Adams Township in particular said they would consider a moratorium if Stanton Township did. Please pick up a road sign and place it in your yard. So Maddie back there is sitting by the signs. Pick one up for your neighbor, your mom or dad, or an aunt, your uncle. We welcome a $20 donation, but if you don't have anything at the moment, this is fine. We really value your support and your interest in learning more about this issue. We have t-shirts you can purchase. I was rolling up the better models that are in the front row. Pick up a t-shirt for your neighbor, your mom or dad, for someone else as well. You can make a donation. We have a little red box in the back. You can make a donation. You can drop off cash or check at the MTU Credit Union. You just tell the teller, here I have some, I have $5, I have $50, and you would like that deposited in the account of the Guardians of the Keweenaw Ridge. And I didn't mention this, but our website is www.guardiansofthekeweenaw.org. Last thing is we really need people to help us out. So we're going to have an informational table at the Houghton County Fair. That's August 26th to 29th. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. You can sign up for an hour or an afternoon or evening. Please do. And then we also need people to go door to door in Stanton Township real soon, because this is a real critical time for us to let our neighbors know about what's going to happen. When I drive in from North Superior Road, I can see where the turbines will be sited from just up from the Canal Road and a good way down Broadwing Canal Road. So please do that. The other thing we need is, and don't worry, we will train you. Or if you're kind of shy, we could align you with Terry. Very outgoing. Okay, so we will educate you to go door to door, or we'll align you with someone that maybe is more experienced. We also need people to start writing letters to the Mining Gazette. So letters to the editor are very important for us. I say pick an issue, research it on our website, and get your letter in ASAP. So what I'm going to do is, I'm done talking, I'm going to turn things over to our president, Charlie Markham, who's going to say a few words, and then our treasurer, Maddie Vanderfield, will say a few words, and then I'll come back and introduce our speakers of the evening.
Thanks, Jim. Well, I'm Charlie Markham. I'm a fourth generation Stanton landowner. My great-grandpa bought most of the Markham property around here. I mean, a few Markhams bought a few things, but I'm living on property that he purchased. Anyway, since 2017, the feds told Circle Power to go somewhere else. I never heard about it. I've been here, I read the newspaper, I got a computer, I got a phone, I listen to the radio, I do everything. They said they engaged with everyone, but I never heard about it. I'm going to tell you how I did hear about it. I like to hunt up there, and somebody told me right after deer season, they said, Charlie, you're going to be mad, because he said, I just hauled a processor up there to cut land or clear cut for wind turbines, and it's going to screw up your hunting. And I thought, that can't be true. So I started doing a little research, because I never heard anything. Even though they supposedly engaged, it never was in the newspaper, it never was in the news, no press release, no nothing. So I contacted the state licensing. Sure enough, they had licenses. So then I started just reaching out to everybody. I met Jim, I knew Jennifer, we started finding people. And anyway, that's kind of how we started. And Circle Power, they've been told now for 5 years, that's not the right place to be. If you look at your electric bill, and their big thing is we're gonna provide low-cost electricity to the residents. Well, 69% of your bill is transmission lines and transmission maintenance. So UPCO was actually forced to take this. They had to go in front of the Board of Light and Power. It's on our Facebook page. And Chris Moore's deposition is on there in his resume, which he started out in the filthy oil industry, according to him. But anyway, so if you have a $100 bill, electric bill, and you want it to go down to 70, they'd have to give you electricity, because it's all maintenance and transmission lines. So if anything, your bill is going up, because UPCO has to put in millions of dollars worth of transmission lines and one of those stations up there too. So, and like Jim said, I want to just reiterate this a little bit. They're already gonna appeal, and they're looking at more places, because he personally told me that. And they looked at Gratiot Lake before and Toivola. You imagine in the Keweenaw what that would, I mean, it's bad enough here, but I mean, to ruin the Keweenaw with wind turbines. And it's just, they said, I heard Mr. Moore tell a person here that 90% of the time those turbines are spinning. They're working 90% of the time. Well, everything I read is like 20 to 30% of the time. He also says your property values, they won't go down, but I personally know some people that contacted me that were gonna build a house there. Now they're thinking about not doing it. There's a bunch of, I live on the Coles Creek Road. I got probably one of the worst houses on Coles Creek Road because they built all kinds of nice fancy houses on there. I'm wondering how those people are thinking that got $500,000-$600,000 houses that they're gonna be listening and seeing wind turbines. So the only reason Circle Power is here is to make money. They don't care about the environment. They care about money. They don't care about you. They care about money. It's not gonna do anything to help you. These guys are smooth as silk. I mean, they're great salesmen. And I know Jim mentioned Warren Buffett. I mean, the guy's a billionaire. These guys, I'm sure, are millionaires. And they want more money. More and more and more. And they don't care who they step on. They don't care about anybody in this room. And that's about all I got to say, except for we're spending a lot of time. This is a full-time job for me because I'm retired. We do need some money. We got t-shirts you can buy, and like Jim said, we want the wind turbine signs out there as much as we can. If you want to give us a donation, fine. And if you can't, we still want you to put the signs out. So, and the fair, definitely. And we'll try to fill in where people didn't sign up. So, and we'll all be there to help.
Can I clarify one number that I think I heard? 575 turbines in Stanton Township?
No, 575 foot tall turbines. In fact, if you look at these t-shirts, this is a little out of scale, but the Quincy mine shaft is 120 feet. So these are 5 times taller. Everywhere you look, when you're on Lake Superior, on Portage Canal, Quincy Hill, Brockway Mountain, Mount Bohemia, you're gonna see wind turbines. And at night, you're gonna see strobes on each one of those turbines. And if Chris Moore was telling the truth and they spin 90% of the time, you're gonna see 36 strobe lights all night long. So hopefully he wasn't telling the truth. Yes, sir.
Are any of the nature conservancies that have property up here saying anything about this?
Not that I've heard of yet, and I haven't, and we've actually talked about contacting some of them, but this is really new. We started our Facebook page at the end of June. We've been, and I just looked and said Charles Markham's been a member for 2 months. So in 2 months, we've done a lot. And without the help of Berga, like Catherine helped us a lot, and Jeanette helped us a lot, and they helped stop the Huron Mountain. They were great mentors. Without their help, we would have been way behind. So we gotta stop them, and they're gonna do whatever they can. Chris Moore said he had $100 million to invest. I bet you if we all pooled our money here, we don't have $100 million. Probably don't even have $5 million. But anyway, that's a lot of money, and the project I think is $35 million. So they're ready to roll.
Charlie, could you let them know why the zoning is important? Because
Yes.
the state turned it over.
You know, like Kevin Martis was talking, and Jim mentioned, likely they're gonna make common sense ordinances. And you know, they wanna use, people don't like zoning, but you can just say everything is gonna remain the same except height and sludge. Because you don't want the, like Catherine's gotta deal with the Borden plant down there where they're burning railroad ties. That's renewable energy. Railroad ties and old tires. I guess it's renewable. but it's filthy. So you can, it's just say you can do everything that you normally did, except if you're going up over 5 stories, I think Kevin said, then you need a variance. So that would help.
But the state turned over all the non-zoned areas to
Right.
these companies.
Right, our governor turned over gave a map to all of these places, or to all of these wind turbine places were easy targets. Stanton and Adams Township are easy targets. They're not zoned. The wind ordinances, they can stomp all over them and change them in a minute. So, I mean, yes, sir.
That just intrigued me. So you're saying if any township passed some ordinance strictly against wind, that can be overturned, but zoning is more must.
Correct, because the one is a police ordinance and the township board can change that in overnight. Where zoning has to go to the vote.
Oh, the people.
Like they had it in Lance, they had, I forget how it was, but they were gonna see if they wanted to make a variance for wind turbines, and the people voted it down.
And so Joe, if you make a police ordinance specifically for industrial wind turbines, if it sounds too much like zoning, then the wind developer can take you to court, and there is precedence of local townships losing because of that. So police ordinance cannot be very strong.
And the other thing is that they get in a new supervisor and board, they can switch it instantly.
Right, so a police ordinance can be changed within, I think it's like 18 hours or so. So very quick. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Maddie, and we are gonna have time after our speaker for questions and discussion and comments.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I just want to applaud you for coming out tonight because this shows a lot of integrity and it says a lot about you to take a nice evening like tonight and come out and learn more. My name is Maddie Manderfield, and my husband Bill and I have lived in Atlantic Mine for 28 years. More specifically, we live on Obenhoff Lake. And when we drove down the driveway, I said to my husband, I feel like I'm driving home. I just had this feeling, this was our place. And we made it our home. We loved it. We raised 5 children there. And we had sled dogs. We had a sled dog business there. At one time we had 40 dogs there, and we do racing and training dogs and selling, and we had the place to ourselves. We loved it. And we drove dogs all over those trails up there. And we had the time of our life, and a lot of work too. It takes a lot of work to take care of those dogs. So we did that for 15 years. So I want to say that Adams and Stanton Township are like an interwoven community. You know, the layout of the township line, it's really kind of wacky, but we are a community of people, and we get along well. And we want to keep it that way, right? And these turbines will actually cause the opposite to happen. It causes a lot of infighting, and we don't want that. We have to stop it before they're up. So I want to say that what one person does in one township actually affects the people in the next township. Okay? I'm in Adams Township, but the closest turbines to us, which were just over 3,000 feet from us, they are in Stanton Township. Okay, so what Stanton Township decides will affect me. And I want to say, my area where I live is just teeming with wildlife. Obenhoff Lake is a watering hole for the animals. There's always activity. In fact, I have videos, just to give you an example. I have a video with 4 young eaglets sparring with each other over turkey and chicken parts. They're chest bumping each other. It's a wonderful video. And then another time I took a video of a mother fox bringing her kit into my field, dropping it off while she went away. I'm suspecting she went to hunt. And she left her kit in the field. Well, I got my camera out and I recorded it. It started jumping for grasshoppers, 4 feet off the ground. It's just a fabulous video. Bill, will you come up, please? And that's just a couple of examples. As people are moving out there, there's a little less activity, but I want to play for you the sound of what the turbines would sound like.
That's a lovely tone, isn't it?
How close is that though? How close?
I can't tell. It's from windwatch.org.
Yeah, and I did watch a video and the woman on there said, that turbine is 3,000 feet from me and I could hear it, you could hear it really well. It'll depend on the wind strength, what direction the wind is blowing, so it can change. But I had a friend who said to me, Maddie, I think these are pretty cool. I don't think there's a problem with them. I think they're really neat. And I played that for her, and she was begging me to turn it off. She couldn't stand it. So my point in playing that for you is, you know, we can hear it really well. How much more powerful are animals' ears and instincts than ours? Do you think the animals are going to stick around when they have to listen and live around that? I don't think so. And that's what, I listen to a lot of testimonies on windwatch.org, and I want to recommend to you that you do the same. The farmers in Wisconsin testify that there aren't animals in their fields anymore. There used to be deer. They don't come around anymore. And these are farmers that are getting paid by the wind companies. So other testimonies are chickens that are sick all the time. They're laying shellless eggs. So that means they're laying early, that the eggs didn't develop shells. One man said his chickens were sick. He had been doing chickens for 22 years, and then he was starting to have sick chickens. He sent his chickens to another farm. They recovered. They were fine. As soon as he brings them back to his farm, they're sick again. I have chickens. I don't want that for my chickens. Another farmer, his cows hardly produce milk anymore. I have a dairy goat, and she produces a lot of milk right now for me. If these go up, is she gonna stop? The reason they don't is that they don't lay down. Okay, a goat or a cow, they rest for about 12 to 16 hours a day. They're laying down. With these turbines in the area, they don't. They're always like in commotion. They're just anxious, and so they don't lay down. Also, I wanted to mention, and then I'm done. There is something called wind shadow. I'm sure you've heard shadow flicker, but I'm not going to talk about that. It's called wind shadow. So the wind behind the blade slows down. So they call that wind shadow. And there was a Harvard study in 2 papers in the journals Environmental Research Letters and I think it's Jewel. Harvard University researchers find that the transition to wind or solar power in the US would require 5 to 20 times more land than previously thought. And that if such large-scale wind farms were built, would warm average surface temperatures over the continental US by 0.24 degrees Celsius. So my point of bringing that up is they're going to require more land. So right now, they're only putting up 12 turbines, so they say, and they're in our territory. I know all of you aren't from Stanton and Adams Township, and thank you for coming from way up north. But they're going to be spreading these out all across the UP. And you know what? If they did that to you, I'd be there with you fighting all the way, because these don't belong in the UP. I'm a Uper, I've always been a Uper, and these do not belong in our UP, do they? Okay, my friend Eric Lee, he took the coordinates from the FAA application, and he made maps of the layout of where these turbines would be, because Chris Moore didn't even want to tell us where they were going to be. So the map is back there on the whiteboard, and there's a number of different ones. He kind of blew it up more, so afterwards we'll look at it. Jim's coming back up.
Eric, yes.
Yeah, I've got a question. I can see this needing to roll out to other townships and counties. Is there any preparation in what you're putting together on your site and with your organization that can be parroted? Obviously, I heard some of the things earlier, but I wondered how much you thought that.
Well, we thought about it. So Charlie said, we learned a lot from our neighbors in Barraca County who stopped a large wind farm in the Huron Mountains. And so they came and educated us really well, and they still advise us. And so we have been contacted by people from other townships in the Keweenaw. And so we're just sharing information that we've collected on our website. And as you know, we've met with lots of environmental groups, political groups throughout the Keweenaw. So that's our plan, to share information with our neighbors.
And those last studies that Maddie just mentioned, are they going to be on your website as well? The last study that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, I can give it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even know that, and Maddie just let you know that's a very good journal that you found.
Yeah.
It's a very respected journal.
Agreed, yes.
Okay, so thanks. So we'll have time for discussion and socializing and food later. So let's get to our talk. So we're videotaping the talk, but we're going to shut the lights off, so you'll be able to see things better. So the video might not turn out as good as we would like. But I'm very honored to introduce our speaker, Joseph Youngman. And so if you're not aware, so someone keep the lights there. If you're not aware, Joseph is a well-known birding expert. His accomplishments are many, but just in short, Mr. Youngman initiated the Manitoba Island Bird Survey. He helped to advance the Keweenaw Raptor Survey, and he has counted water birds in Frida and other locations of Lake Superior. His efforts have led to a greater understanding of breeding birds in the Keweenaw and efforts to identify specific pathways of migrating raptors and water birds throughout the Lake Superior Basin. So we asked Joseph to talk for about 25 minutes or so, half hour, and we're hoping you'll have some questions or discussion for him or board members afterwards. So thank you very much. Let's welcome Joseph.
Thank you. I talk a lot to Copper Country Audubon, and I figured I'm gonna get away without the microphone. Has everybody got me? Yeah, I'm good at blabbing loud. James, would you, I wanna make sure I got, oh, can I use arrow key? Where's the arrow key? Do that one? Is this the up? Yeah, there we go. Okay, very good. Okay, he asked me to talk about, I'm definitely an expert on the raptor movement through the Keweenaw Peninsula, and that's what you're gonna get lots of that, because that's what I know. I definitely do a lot of work with water birds, which includes loons, and bats I know very little about. I got a little information, so this talk is gonna be pretty small on bats. Oh, another thing is, you can save questions to the end if you like, or you can interrupt, flag me down. I mean, it's not the kind of a talk that you're gonna disturb my mojo. So again, we're mainly the first half of this first 3/4 of the talk is all about raptor migration in the Keweenaw, but we gotta start out on a bigger scale, basically Midwest and Upper Michigan. These smiley faces, 4 smiley faces, are the 4 places that are spring raptor migration counts. Technically in Ashland there, that one existed for I think about 10 years and doesn't happen anymore, but Duluth has been going on since the 50s. This one you'll hear a lot about, that's Keweenaw Whitefish Point, has been going on since I believe the 80s. So every spring at these sites, raptors are being counted by a skilled counter, and that's, so a lot of the data and the information I'm giving you to about how raptors move in the Keweenaw is from these various projects. The very first, the early people knew there were massive movements of raptors up through the Keweenaw, especially focused on Brockway Mountain. A lot of people knew there was a massive movement of raptors out to Manitou Island. The lighthouse keepers would talk about how many zillions of raptors they'd see up there. So back in 2010, a group that consisted of, it was a combination, a coalition between the Marquette Audubon Club called the Laughing Whitefish Audubon and our local Copper Country Audubon. And then I was one of the 4 people, the gang of 4, who kind of coordinated that thing, and we called it the Keweenaw Raptor Survey. I thought it was a great name, but it was my choice, but you'll see. So we ran for 3 years, collected a lot of data. And then it switched over to this. Now it's called, ever since then, it's been called the Brockway Mountain Hawk Watch. And it's run by different people. Copper Country Audubon still contributes a significant amount of money to help it happen because this is a paid counter. But it's run by a bunch of people up at Copper Harbor mainly. So again, every year, well, I guess the next slide will give us more of the details. Oh, and a couple of pictures just of what happens up there. About that first slide was a golden eagle. Well, I gotta give the golden eagle spiel. And this is a golden eagle. Because I'm a known birdman, people are always telling me about the golden eagles they see. And unfortunately, 99% of the time they think they're seeing a golden eagle, they're not. Golden eagles, I'll give you some of this little sidetrack here. They definitely, some of them breed up north by James Bay, or up north of James Bay. So we get some moving through spring and fall. But our Brockway Mountain count gets about 700, 800 bald eagles every year. They average about 40 goldens. And these people are experts. So that gives you an indication. And that's just migration. If it's in summer, it's not bloody likely you're seeing a golden eagle. Bald eagles go through many different plumages, so they look different. But this is a golden eagle, and ravens hate golden eagles. So this is at Brockway. When you're doing a count, sometimes I substitute count up there. And you know there's a golden eagle around because the ravens that nest about 100 yards down, you'll hear them start making a special ack sound. Yes?
You know, you always see the ravens just hating eagles. And I always assume the eagles are killing them, eating the eggs. Why?
This is a classic case where the guy's going to pretend he knows even though he doesn't because I'm a guy. I'm not an expert on that, but from what I know, and are you seeing them chase bald eagles?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Because even bald eagles can be pretty aggressive, but golden eagles are much more of a badass hunter, and they take birds. But whereas bald eagle are really more like fishermen, and I've heard very definitely from a bunch of people who know what they see them take ducks and even geese from the water. But taking a bird out of the air is pretty fancy shooting for bald eagles. No, think about it. Out at Manitou Island, we've seen bald eagles carrying in various big birds that they got out over the lake. One of them was like a great blue heron, actually. So yeah, both the eagles can be pretty aggressive, but goldens are especially aggressive. They're much more of a hunter than bald eagles are. So anyways, that was just a pretty picture that Mike Shute took of the eagle and golden eagle and a raven up that Brockway. Nice red-tailed hawk. So at Brockway Mountain, where we started counting the hawks in 2010, raptors go both ways there. They go both ways, but most of them, the great majority of the raptors they've seen are going eastbound, so that's the official count. So if you ever go on, there's a website called Hawk Count that has a lot of data for hawk counts all across the country. Our count is the eastbound birds. So the count period has always been from March 15th to June 15th, and you can see the numbers below. The lowest we ever had in that period was 5,000, the highest was 25, so it varies significantly, and I'm afraid you don't ask me why, because I don't know. The average turns out to be 13,000 a year. That's a listing from top to bottom of the most common species, the Broadwing Hawk, sharp-shinned red-tailed. By far, the greatest number is Broadwing Hawks. They come in May. They're kind of a late mover. And Broadwing Hawk, right back to our case in point here, Broadwing Hawks will be the hawks that are nesting in the areas of these possible towers. Broadwing Hawks are the common hawk that lives in the forests of the UP. So, then another thing, so again, like I say, people have known that there's been this big movement of raptors up at Brockway Mountain and up into the Keweenaw. But I've been involved in all of the work and studies out at Manitou Island, and here and here and here and here we've done counts. Of the thousands that come up into the Keweenaw, we've seen very, very little evidence that any of them cross Lake Superior. And again, this is one where I'm the one of the people who actually has seen it. I've been on the Isle Royal for many water bird studies, and once in a while you do see a raptor coming across Lake Superior from the Keweenaw. Very few species, and the numbers are just very, very small. So of the thousands of raptors that go up the Keweenaw, we really don't think any, very, very, 1% might cross. So in other words, what else do they do? And then I mentioned that Brockway, we see raptors going westbound. The numbers going, I thought I had, oh yeah, excuse me, I jumped ahead. This different years, 2012, 11, 10, these are the eastbound numbers and the westbound, so you can just go back and forth and see that it's reasonably consistent. It's not, the west is always like maybe a quarter of the east or a fifth. But every year we see thousands going west besides the many thousands that go east. Then one year we decided to try and break that down to figure out if they're all going east, what happens to them? We went out to Manitou Island. We did not see them going here or here. So then we did some studies where we had the main observer here, an observer here, an observer here. So these are what we've seen. The bigger the arrow, the bigger the movement in this slide. So big movement at Brockway, big movement coming back, and smaller movements going west. We broke it down. We had an observer at Bay Degree Beach. These are the numbers that they had. But these were not the 3-month studies. This was just like 4 days we had people at these sites. But just wanted to see if they're not going back west at Brockway, is it possible they're coming back in other parts of the peninsula and we just don't see them at Brockway? And that sure looks like the case. They had many more westbounders at Bay Degree Beach and at Rocky Ridge, which is kind of basically near Medora. They had, again, they had more going east than west, but still a lot going west in a much higher proportion than Brockway. So here's we can tell. There's a lot of birds coming back west out of the tip of the Keweenaw. So then we go back to this. Again, if thousands of birds are coming up and we don't think any cross, where do they go? Our assumptions have always been that they probably just kind of vaguely follow the shoreline and come around the lake. Because the reason we don't see them crossing the lake is most raptors do not want to cross the lake. They're not made to fly like that. They want to fly with thermals where they can just stick their wings out and glide. There's a couple of species that have the power and strength, like bald eagles, or a peregrine falcon would think nothing of crossing that lake for something to do. 50 miles, big deal. But most of the raptors do not want to cross. So we always assumed they were going to go down around like that. And the Duluth count has like 20 to 30,000 every year. And the Ashland counts, which I showed you on the map, their biggest days the movement was coming from the northeast. So what's northeast of Ashland? The Porkies and us. I put this triangle on there to show you where the alleged towers might be. So you'll see this map a lot, the map of Keweenaw, strains from the Porkies up to the tip. So we decided one year we did a modest little study at the Porkies, right at the very start of the Porkies, and we did a count there. It wasn't a full 3-month count, it was just a little thing, only 29 days, and we only had 875 westbound raptors. But to show you, to compare it to Brockway had more, but it does show that a significant portion of the Brockway raptors do seem to be seen right here, down at the Porkies. So the red arrows now show you known raptor flights, as in somebody has been there and seen them and counted. This is not assuming anything. We've got data. We actually don't technically have data from there, but a lot of people have been there and seen it. That's basically Bumbletown Hill. But we've got data from there and there. We know those movements are happening. We know the movements happening there. This next slide gives you what we think are assumed flights. How do these birds get from here to there? As they enter the Keweenaw, they're not concentrated. At Broadwing Mountain, they're very concentrated because they love that skinny ridge and the uplifts, the wind uplifts. But there is no concentrated flow, so these spread out areas is what we just assume is happening with the raptors coming into the Keweenaw. But kind of my whole point is they go up to the tip, and then what happens? And near as we can tell, they're probably just following down here to here, and you see how there can be a real conflict with some towers there. But again, the black arrows, nobody has data for that. Although, frankly, the company hired a couple of hotshots this spring to count raptors, and we don't have their data. I was talking to Catherine, and I don't think any of you have access to that data they've gotten to you. That would be certainly interesting. Again, it's going to be their, maybe biased data, maybe they, but let's see the data that they collected this spring. Although again, remember the concentration thing. When you're talking about raptors, the places they do these special counts is where they're just for some reason, geographically, they're wedged into a tight area, so it makes sense to put a counter there. In this area, there is no concentrating factor. The ridge here, it's a ridge, but it ain't a ridge like Brockway. Obviously, most of you all know Brockway. So there wouldn't be a concentrating effect here. The raptors might be, like when I was counting at Porkies, some of them were within a half mile of the shoreline. Some of them were just to the south of me, maybe a mile from the shoreline, and I can see others going 2 miles in, but they were all going west. So there is no concentrating effect. There's going to be more here than they get at any one count site because you can only see about a mile to see Earth. Yes?
I can tell you because I live right there by Wilkade Bluff, and I was climbing there all the time, and that's where they were counting, was on top of it.
Oh, the guys this year?
Yeah, because I talked to them quite a few times. They weren't really counting, his girlfriend was there.
But anyways, I know and again, it makes sense from the process, they are required to do some sort of studies. In fact, about 3 years ago, I was approached to be a hired counter to do the counts down in the Baraga County area. And I wasn't interested. So anyways, you get the idea how we know certain things about movements in the Keweenaw, and there's thousands of raptors, but we know then there's some other things that we just have to assume at this point. Then that's basically that. The fall, I don't have anything on fall migration because it isn't just fall migration of raptors. It's just much less in the Keweenaw. And basically, it's when you think back to the shape of lakes, Michigan and Wisconsin, and they bump into that lake, and they got to figure out how to go around it. But in this fall, they come in. It's a triangular-shaped lake. When they hit the top, they're just going to slide off the Minnesota way or the other side. So the other thing that actually might be affected by these towers a little bit is the fall waterbird migration that passes all along the Keweenaw. This is one that, considering the size of this migration, it's much bigger than the raptor migration in the spring. And well, I take a poll. How many have ever heard about that the Broadwing Mountain is a hawk migration site? Maybe at least 15 people. How many ever heard that the whole Keweenaw Peninsula is a massive fall waterbird migration site? Whoa, more than I thought. So certainly 4 people, but it's this huge migration. It's about between a half mile and a mile and a half off. The late Lori Binford was the one who discovered it, retired ornithologist, and our club has done a little work on it. So it's this massive duck and loon migration. Here's a picture of a bunch of scoters taken by our counter last year at Manitou. And this is a map I put together, kind of piecing together, because as near as we can tell, these waterbirds are not moving in just a broad front. They're moving in kind of highways, pathways. And we noticed Binford discovered this black arrow, these birds that come up the Keweenaw, and they shoot across in here, and they go by whitefish. There's another pathway here. There's certainly a pathway that comes between Passage Island and the main island there. And these two meet up at Manitou Island. So then bringing that, so I'm going to start with a big picture on Lake Superior, bringing it home to your neighborhood. So Lori Binford discovered the movement up here. He got me interested, and I started doing counts, and he said, yeah, do counts at the McLean. I did a count at Frida. So I did these little pilot counts and discovered, yeah, there's still lots of birds moving. And we decided in 17, I talked our crop country board into hiring a hotshot to do the count. So we did a fall count at Frida, right at the stamp sand site. And so then these are some of the numbers he got. Oh, excuse me, first is just the arrows. The main movement along the Frida shoreline is northeast. But there's about at least a third of birds are going the other way, and we don't really know what's going on. Our job is just to go document what's happening. So the waterbirds are moving both ways at Frida. And like I say, they're half a mile offshore or a mile offshore. They're quite a ways off, which again, not like it could ever happen here, but if anybody ever talked about offshore wind sites, that would be a huge disaster for these birds. I think we're lucky here that even if anybody wanted to, I believe the lake dives so deep that a half mile offshore they couldn't put it. Yeah.
Is it in the spring that those counts are being made?
No, this is fall.
This is fall. Okay.
Fall, just fall water. It's kind of a lot. It's almost like maybe the reverse of what I said about raptors. In the spring, the Keweenaw gets a massive movement of raptors up and back out. In fall, it's kind of and spring with waterbirds is the opposite. There's massive birds coming in by whitefish, and they're going up and up and up. And we just get a little button kind of crossing by Manitou, and they. So although some common loons do just cross the land here. But this fall, waterbirds is pretty much a fall thing, this massive migration. So these are the numbers. Again, it was a 3-month count. And 32,000 going, 32,000 total, and about 21,000 were going northeast and 11,000 were going southwest.
So the common loons cross where the turbines would be sometimes?
I'm getting there, you're anticipating. Yeah, and common loons, I already mentioned that these birds tend to stay in these pathways that, stay within the lines. Common loons, just like you think about loons, they don't believe, they're not rule followers. Common loons will stay within the lines, but a lot of them don't. This is a classic, redneck grebes is one of the massive numbers of birds. Rednecks really stay within the lines. They follow these pathways, but just about the next slide, I'll be getting to the loons, and that's where the turbines could come in. So anyway, big numbers of things going by. This is a breakdown of the species. Because these birds are so far out, even our expert counter was unable to identify a lot of them, so they end up just called unidentified ducks. But those are different species and the most common species. And you can see how small the numbers of loons are compared to ducks. There's not nearly as many loons as ducks. So this is what happens with just the loons in the fall. Most of the birds, when you're there, they're just coming along the shoreline and they come up and they go around. A lot of them are actually coming straight off the lake. That's what these two smaller arrows. They come in and you'll just watch them turn. They come in straight to you, straight southeast. And you can see them, they make this big slow turn and then they just follow everybody up the way. So that's what most of the loons do in the fall. But some, like I say, some of them, they don't care about land. A lot of these ducks and things, they just don't like to fly over land, which is why they turn and follow the shore. But loons clearly don't care about flying over land in the daytime. And I guess I need to explain that. Obviously, ducks have to pass over land to get to where they're going, but they generally do it at night. They don't know why, but they think it might be a predatory thing or even just temperature. Most of these ducks don't want to cross land in the daytime. The loons clearly don't care. I've seen them many places. In the spring, I've been in Covington and you hear a loon call in the middle of the day and you look up and here goes a loon and then another loon. I live here, we get loons flying over here. Loons pass all along the Keweenaw waterway in the spring. You keep your eye out in early May. If you look up just over the bridge or over Tech, you might see a loon going northwest. So a modest number of loons do cross right there at Frida. We see them to the left, we see them to the right. So these loons would be in danger from any turbines in that area. This is just a little blurb about who did our count. Louis Dombrowski, one of the best highly skilled birders in the state of Michigan, that was paid for by Copper Country Audubon. And our treasurer, a big hand for the guy who writes the checks right there. In fact, I gotta butter him up because in early October, our club is sending another expert to Keweenaw Island to do more of these water bird studies. So I gotta stay on Bill's good side and get him a receipt. So here's back just a couple of pictures of what it looks like. This, again, I've talked to landowners up in the Keweenaw. I asked them, can we use your land to do these water bird counts? And he's an Audubon member. Oh, sure, you come on out, count what you want. You ain't gonna see anything. So again, a guy who's in the Audubon Club, you think he'd pay attention to birds. He had no idea, and I just showed you those numbers, 32,000 birds going by. He didn't know we were gonna see them. They're far enough out. And again, even on a good day, you might have 6,000 go by, but that's not a solid block, So most times you look out, even if you look with your binoculars, you're not seeing much. But they're way out there and they're there. So anyways, these are a bunch of redheads. And these are really hard to see, but these are the redneck grebes, a line of about 5 of them. They are, where are we, in middle August? Redneck grebes are migrating through already. They start pretty early.
When did the loons come?
Some of the loons will be moving now, but loons, I think the peak, loons, I think some of them is kind of concentrated, different species have different times, like classic is long-tailed duck that doesn't go until late October, they don't come. Loons, some of them must be starting now, like a loon that failed, maybe they were in Manitoba, they had 2 chicks and they all both died. They're going to maybe pick up and leave a little earlier. But loons are spread out. I think the peak is probably going to be late September, early October. The question?
Yeah. You were discussing how some folks were surprised to find out how much was actually migrating over their own land and so on. Is there a special technique needed to be used to count these?
To see them?
that perhaps, if you see them, that perhaps someone who isn't looking for them really hard might miss them doing their surveys?
Well, I thought I knew you, but you threw me at the end. I'll babble and you tell me if I've answered your question.
Okay.
They are far enough out that they're hard to see with the naked eye.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, the really close ones sometimes is just, whoa, yeah, there they go. But they're quite a ways out, and so if you're not looking with binoculars, you're gonna miss most of them. In some cases, if you're not looking with a spotting scope, you're gonna miss some. They're that far out. So the other thing, of course, is that it's not like a steady stream. There might be 10 minutes of absolutely nothing, even on a good day. There might be nothing for 10 minutes. So if you're a Joe landowner and you go out, hey, I heard there's this migration, I'm gonna go see it. You stand there for 10 minutes with your binoculars and you see nothing, so you say, skip it. So that there's big dead patches, but our people use, $3,000 spotting scopes to do this. I mean, you find them with your binoculars and then they'll use the spotting scope to get in there and try and count and identify the species. So, did I answer your question?
Can I add something? So if you read the documents between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Circle Power, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has they've informed Circle Power that their counters are not doing things correctly. So if you're sitting in the woods, you only have a certain radius that you can see into the sky if you're counting raptors. And they told them they need to increase the diameter or radius that they're counting.
And you need to have their eyes open?
Well, maybe they have their eyes open. Maybe not.
Well, again, Raptors is a whole different ballgame. When in the spring, at least there aren't leaves on, when most of these leaves on. But you're standing in the forest as if you can see raptors. You're lucky to see one or two. Yeah, I don't know what protocol they had, but they should have gotten these guys up in the air, or at least in the middle of somebody's old farm field, so where you can look. But that's interesting that you say U.S. Feds were knocking their protocol. But so did I answer the question about the water?
I think so.
Okay, next.
I just feel like, for what you're saying, and I'm not really like looking for birds, we constantly see birds here. Like, all the time. There's just, we see eagles and hawks
Oh, yeah.
all
yeah.
over the place.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of birds in the Keweenaw.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But again, what I'm talking about are two very specialized things: the migration of fall water birds and spring raptors. It's, we've got, and again, in the title, talked about the birds that breed here. A lot of these birds don't breed here, and some do. If for any questions, I haven't really talked about breeding birds, except I mentioned the Broadwing Hawks will be the hawks that will be nesting near these in significant numbers near these towers. But after, I'll answer any questions about breeding birds here. But yeah, I'm just talking about migrating, and that also is really germane to talking about wind turbines, because if you put a bunch of wind turbines, or even one, in a highway, you're going to slaughter the birds. You want to know where these highways are. So that's why that's why they talk to me, and that's why I'm giving you my best information on where I think these pathways are. So I'll move on. I'll get more questions at the end. This is a picture by Tim Mayerwald from Manitou last fall. Another thing, because I've done a lot of these counts, I've seen owls crossing the lake. Generally, owls are going to migrate at night, but sometimes they screw it up and they end up coming in the morning. You don't see lots of owls. You might see, one once a month in one of these fall things. But that's a long-eared owl that just crossed Lake Superior to Manitou Island. I'll just know whether to read that one or let you read it. When doing these counts, I've seen bats migrating across the lake at every site I've been at. Now, how many bats have I seen? I might, in a day, a lousy day of the ducks, you get 300. On a good day, you'll get 6,000. I'm talking 2 or 3 bats a season. But I just talked to John Depew, the DNR biologist at Baraga, who's definitely done a lot of work with bats. My assumption here that bats migrate at night, he said, yes, if I'm seeing 2 or 3 in the morning, there was a lot more that came over that night. So the same thing applies. Remember back to my loons, so this owl coming in off the lake, if they cross the lake at Frida and come into your turbines, not good. And again, now that we're to my insignificant little back portion of the talk, I assume a lot of you people know, your board members, and John made this point, it's well documented nationwide, I mean continent-wide, that wind turbines slaughter bats. There's just, and that's why apparently one of the major reasons the state nixed this, this proposal was because they're worried about bats. And there's tons of scientific documentation. Wind turbines are really tough on bats. So, and again, but I just want you to know that I've seen bats migrating in at Frida, literally 2 or 3, but they're there. And of course, that's just ones that are migrating from Canada. What about all your locals? Which is my final slide. What was the name of the researcher who, James, you sent me that article, the bat?
Oh, Alan Kirka.
Yeah, so that, out of that, I just pulled, there's a scientific journal article about bats in hibernacula in the Upper Peninsula, and they went to like, was it 50 different mines or something? A lot of mines. And of course, I just narrowed it down to our Keweenaw Ridge. They did a couple of mines at the Porkies, they did a few in the Greenland area. They had, that must be somewhere around Copper Falls. They didn't have Quincy on there, but I was able to get a hold of John Depew, who'd been out of town, and John Depew says absolutely, bats are migrating, hibernating in the Quincy mine. So, you know, all along the Keweenaw Ridge, you've got bats that are hibernating, and of course they've been hit really, really hard by white nose, so they're way, way, way down. Another thing that John said that was found very interesting, I asked him, you know, did he have any knowledge of bats hibernating in these mines? He said no, but what he said, I want to make sure I get this right, he said, because a lot of mines they can't get into. They're closed up, for at least the human, but if there's a small hole. So what he said was, any mine in the Keweenaw that they got into looking for bats hibernating, they found them. So again, that doesn't tell you that they're hibernating in these bat mines right here, but he said they couldn't get into those mines, so. And that wraps it up. Sorry, I
Question. This might sound like an odd question, maybe, but when you're trying to point out something like this to an entity that would care about, you know, the migration patterns and whatnot, it seems like the Raptors would be one that would stand out. Hey, we could be causing something, negative to their migration pattern and their habitat. Is that the same with the smaller species? That, I mean, and you might have been involved with other groups similar to this.
a little smaller species of birds.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the count, you can do the counting. What I'm saying is, with the impact of, you're going to be hurting the finches, the robins, et cetera, be the same? And I know, again, it's more of a political question than it is.
No, well, to me it's a scientific question, and I think I can safely say that I don't know, and nobody knows. The little guys are so much harder, and they do tend to be broad front migrants. Remember back to the waterbirds and the raptors, I hope I pounded it home. The reason we can get these great counts is because they funnel into these narrow places sometimes. In general, raptors are just broad, you know, they just come right up the damn continent. But they tend to follow ridges, and in the Keweenaw, they go, oh, we don't want to cross that lake, so they do weird things. And the waterbirds, they tend to, at least on Lake Superior, they get in these little funnels. So we can say, oh, we'll count from here, and we'll be able to count them all instead of having 16 counters. But once you get to the little guys, show's over, man. They go in huge, broad front things that I believe on the good days are hundreds of miles wide. I mean, and they'll be really thick. And not to say that they won't get slaughtered by turbines, they do. But it's so much harder to predict. And from near as I can tell from the little bit of study, I have no personal knowledge. I've just read some studies and talked to people. But from a little studying I've done is that you can't even predict from year to year. Like these other things, the raptors, we've done it. And they're there every year. The water birds, they're there every year. This is tradition, this is what we're gonna do. Whereas I really get the idea that the little guys, anything from little warblers and sparrows and robins and slightly bigger things, blackbirds and blue jays, I don't know that anybody's seen any real clear patterns. Like, do they follow up the Keweenaw? I don't think they do.
I think the best thing to do with look is the stuff they're doing with the sonar.
Radar.
And the radar, just to track the birds at night is fascinating.
Yeah, since the early 60s, they've been doing lots with radar. They do more and more and more all the time with radar. But near as I can tell, there is, and again, it was just big buildings in the cities are killing birds by the thousands. Lighthouses back in the days would kill birds by the thousands. They get attracted at night to the lights in the big cities. They're bumping into the buildings. At Michigan Tech, they're dying at buildings. Although technically that's a little different. Some of the birds that die at Tech, because students did some studies there, those are birds that are migrating through and then they went down for the night and are maybe just moving around and don't notice a window as a window and die. But in the big cities, the big buildings just kill birds that are migrating. Boom. And they find them on the sidewalk. So there's a lot of effect for any wind turbines, or like these wind turbines downstate. It'd be interesting to find out how many birds they're killing. But one major thing there is they've learned that early on, and even at Tech, these students learned that the death happens at night because that's when these birds migrate. The little guys are mostly migrating at night. So whether they're hitting just our cell towers or a wind turbine or anything, bang, I hit it, I'm dead, and I'm gonna be gone in the morning. Because there's owls, there's foxes, that to even get an accurate estimate of the number is almost impossible because they'd have to be out there all night with flashlights going under every tower. And they're obviously not doing that. So the scavengers clean up before the counters can even get there to do the counts.
And most of the counts are proprietary.
Yeah.
From the death count, from kill counts.
Yeah, it's not like...
And the ones they do, they only search, 25-foot area around the turbine base. Well,
if the blade is that big.
The blades are 200 feet long, so...
Yeah.
The microwave towers got about 12 guy wires on them. They're pretty good at killing birds too.
Oh yeah, just the guy wires.
Especially when they're lit, and the lights, depending on the color and the frequency that it blinks, it will attract the young birds, which they all migrate at night.
Yeah, they're learning. Bill's pointing out that, because they've been studying this for probably 2 decades now, that the birds sometimes, especially if it's foggy, if they see those LED lights on the tower, they just kind of suckers them in, and they're just doing laps around the tower, and oh shit, there was that guy wire, you're dead. Because there's no lights on they're not literally flying right into a tower at night that's lit. But guy wire, you can't see it. So, and they've done some studies, and I don't keep up on this at all, but studying about different colored lights and whether they're flashing or steady. And there's some work that scientists have done and are doing on trying to figure out the best way to light these things so we kill the least amount of birds. And I assume somebody's studying bats too, but it sounds like it's just as bad or worse with bats as it is with birds.
Well, you look at the turbines, we're talking about 500 feet here, down to about 100. The elevation, is that like prime elevation, or are there birds at one?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Good point. Did anybody get it? He's saying, it's only a certain space of the sky. It's not right on the ground. It's not 2 miles high. It's a certain very big space.
Yeah.
And for the little guys, when they're taking off or landing, that's critical. Normally, they're going to be well above that. They don't go really high, but I believe they're a couple thousand, at least 1,000 feet. So the little guys, from what I understand, is that a lot of little warblers might be taken off on a spring night, on the right night, from down, let's say, Iron Mountain. And they're going to land across north of Lake Superior. That's how the little guys, as weird as it sounds, if they got the right fuel, a bunch of fat, they will fly a couple 100 miles at night. So they're just going to jump right over Lake Superior if they do it right. So again, and they'll be, during the main part of the flight, they're up there in safety. But when they got to come down every morning and they got to start up slowly every evening, so that would be the critical period where either just towers or especially Cuisinarts would be dangerous. But in Raptors along the Keweenaw, they're perfect height for this. They would be really, I should change that. Or again, I'll give a little explanation on how raptors generally migrate. You probably have seen, especially like a vulture, they just sit there and turn in the sky. That's the way they want to migrate. There's things called thermals. You get enough sun, it creates a tower of warm air. So they get into the thermal, and all they got to do is just do this. And if you pay attention to them, you'll notice, well, he's a little higher than he was a minute ago. They just sit there and turn in the thermal, and the rising air lifts them from, let's say, 200 feet to 1,000 feet. Sometimes they go so high we can't see them. Our expert guys has to use the binoculars. So raptors are weird in that they go up and up and up in these things, sometimes only a couple hundred feet, but sometimes they're going to go well above any turbines, but then they just fall. Let's say they want to go, at Broadwing, they want to go east. So they get way up high, and then they just fall to the east. Again, do not flap, just hold your wings out, and you fall about 4 miles, and you finally get down to 200 feet. Well, you better find another thermal, and you ride your way up. So that raptors, in terms of back to your thing about this killing zone, a lot of times they're well above it, but a lot of times they're right at in that killing zone.
And the proposal for these puts them on all the high places.
Oh yeah, of course, well again, if you're an engineer looking for a place to put your windmill, you put it where the wind is, and you gotta get it up in the wind.
You know, Maddie was talking about how the temperature would rise on the surface, and that's the reason the turbines push the air down. So if there was a thermal and the eagle or something went over it, and the air is getting pushed to the ground because it's spinning, would that eagle drop down and maybe hit the next turbine? Or?
Yeah, that's way out of my league. I mean, that's some pretty fancy physics there. There's the wind. There has to be wind, or the turbine wouldn't be turning. So there's a certain amount of breeze, and the eagle is, riding. Thermals are very. I picture them. I think I got this right. They're like a tornado that you can't see. Although a big fat tornado, they're not little skinny things. So that there's this, maybe even double the size of this room, is this rising column. So the bird will just kind of, and they're usually, you don't just see one yet. At these counts, you might see 200 or 300, or in some places you get thousands of birds, and it's called the Kettle of Hogs. So they're in this thermal, and we're all just, if we could all do it here, we could just go up and walk around and around and around, and we're going to gradually rise up through the ceiling because the air is lifting us. So back to your thing. And again, you don't know where a thermal is. In fact, near as I can tell, in some cases there will be a certain patch of ground that gets a lot of sun. It's going to have thermals regularly.
A big 50-foot cement slab, 50 foot deep.
That's probably too small. That's probably too small. But anyways, thermals are created, just nature does it, and you can't see them, but the birds somehow detect them. And you can see it, that there'll be 5 eagles here, there's one over there, and he sees them, and he or she just comes over, I'm going to get in on the elevator. So they come, and then they gradually go up, and they go whichever way. Like in the Broadway, they might take the same elevator up, and one has already been to the point, and he knows it's useless, so he's going back west. So we might all take the same elevator up, and some go west, and some go east. Generally, they're all going to go the same direction. Spring, they want to go north, fall, they want to go south.
I know one of the issues that I have is that I know eagles will mate for life. So if they kill one of the mates, eventually they can find another mate, but normally they're monogamous birds.
Again, it's way out of my league, but my impression with all those birds, that sooner or later, they're gonna.
If a mate dies, because I've done a lot of studying on between the golden eagle and the bald eagle, also, but they will mate for life. Eventually, a female may come in to take over, to mate with the male, but normally they are lifers.
Yeah, I've heard that, but I suspect, again, I have no bird knowledge, but because I'm dealing with swans now, I'm doing swan studies, and I remember hearing about, here's just another thing, again, it's not eagles, but it's owls. I talked to one of the fanciest owl experts on the continent once, because I forget what it was, but I got his phone number. He was some hotshot academic and studied owls for 40 years. He was talking about, and great horned owls are what we were specifically talking about. Great horns are all over the place here. They're great horned owls all across the continent. I brought up something like, the farmers say that, oh yeah, them owls, they've been there for the last, always there, the same 10, they're, for 20 years they're there. And he pointed out something that didn't occur to me. He said, yeah, there's always owls there, but there's a lot more turnover in the owls that you think. As if you recognize, they both have glasses and they both got a little beard, but do the farmers or any of us know that, yes, that's the same owl male that was there last year, and there's the same female. There's more turnover in some, again, I'm not saying this is with bald owls, but bald eagles, but there's clearly more turnover, than people can see, because we just can't tell them apart visually. One swan from another, or one eagle.
You think they have like generational memory where they would come back to a nest because they were born there? Do birds do something like that? Or?
That gets real complicated. Maybe you've even seen it with sandhill cranes. In the spring around here, you'll see a pair and they're chasing somebody out. Guess who they're chasing out? Last year's kid. But with cranes, I think a lot of that does happen. They might come back, but a lot of other birds, they do disperse, like our falcons on the bridge. From what I know, and again, no personal knowledge, but reading the literature, they spread out. In fact, now that most of the peregrines in the Midwest are banded, they're getting some really interesting facts. Like our female on this bridge, she was born hatched in the Mississippi River between Iowa and Wisconsin. Because they're banning a lot of these birds, and if you can get a good look, you can say, oh, it's this old, and here's where it came from. When I was looking, there's a cool website that my wife and I don't watch television, we just have the computer on with some webcam with peregrine falcons down in Wisconsin. We just changed the channel between the different falcons, and you can read the bands, and I read a band last week on one of them. Where is she from? I think she was born on Lake Superior, hatched in Lake Superior, and she moved to down near Milwaukee and decided this power plant was a good place where she wanted to nest. So these birds move around a lot.
How do you think this will affect the cranes since they do come back to the same spot?
Cranes?
The sandhill cranes?
Yeah, wheels are turning.
This spring I watched them fly over the way they came in would be where they're wanting to put the.
I wouldn't think there would be a tremendous effect, but I know I don't know a lot about the effects of, and again, how long have these turbines existed? 20 years? I mean, anywhere. So that just how much does an eagle or a crane or anybody know to turn that thing sideways? I can see the big post. Well, I'm not going to fly into the post. And there's this huge, slowly turning thing. How smart are these birds? They never dealt with anything remotely like this. We know to look out for eagles, we know to look out, but we're going to be scared with this big, slow-moving thing?
It's not slow. They're not slow.
Yeah, but it looks slow. It looks slow to you and me. I bet you it looks slow to an eagle, unless they really study the tip of it. And yeah, what did you say the speed is at the tip?
180 miles an hour.
So again, back even to the cranes or any kind of big bird that's moving, I don't know how, quote, dumb they would be. Would they try and fly through the path here and get killed?
I know in Indiana, they moved where they were going to put their windmills. They moved them closer to like Illinois because the cranes go down to Tippecanoe for their.
Oh, they have a specific. Yeah, as you get south of here.
Moved like from Pulaski County over to like closer to Illinois because of the cranes.
Well, brings up kind of another interesting issue. Remember, I'm back to my Raptors and my waterbirds that are funneled up here in various places. Our cranes aren't funneled. Period. I'm quite sure I know that. They're everywhere around here. We've all got our cranes in our various wetlands. So, yeah. Do your two cranes get killed by the tower? Quite possibly. And hers too. So you might even wipe out the cranes in Stanton Township at worst, outcome. But that's a whole different ballgame from let's say they put it out there and killed 20,000 ducks in 1 year. See my point? So it's what different scales of death and things here. But yeah, I'm not saying cranes are smart enough or they're not going to be killed, but I guess I don't see a tremendous damage here to cranes. And what you're bringing up down there, because I know for a fact I used to live down there, there's places in the winter that thousands of cranes gather. So you don't want wind turbines. in those areas, because you're just gonna slaughter them, whereas we're so spread out. I do counts out at Arnheim, and the biggest number of cranes we ever see in the Keweenaw is 300 at once. And that would be a good place not to have a tower, because they come in and out of the DNR impoundments at Arnheim. But so, yeah, I guess, again, I think it's fair to say that they don't pose any special threat to sand hill cranes, but hell yes, it could kill them.
We want to keep our cranes.
Yeah, yeah. Next.
A lot of us have seen the videos of a supposedly slow turning wind turbine with an eagle over it, and the blade comes around and it cuts the eagle. And that's an impact that's obvious to see and so on. You know birds, I know way too much physics about these wind turbines. There's a thing called wingtip vortices, they're like this expanding spiral of very turbulent air. I mentioned small birds and so on. As these wingtip vortices corkscrew downwind of these buggers, is that going to disturb the habitat that small birds are going to try and live in? I know if you land a small plane behind a large plane, the wingtip vortices off a large plane,
Just of a plane?
the wing will flip the plane over.
No way.
Yeah. You got high pressure air under a wing or in front of the wind turbine. And then it rolls around the tip. And then just, you end up with this corkscrew coming off of the tip of each of these things. These things corkscrew downwind. And I know for a fact it'll flip a small plane if you're flying into an airport behind a large plane. It's like you give them a lot of room, you stay in the middle, let the vortices move to the outside. Now, these things have got twice the landing speed of a typical jetliner at the tip. And these things have got nice hard vortices coming off each one of these three things, corkscrewing downwind.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to disturb the habitat of the smaller birds downwind? We're just trying to fly along and all of a sudden, woo!
Heck if I don't. Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
know.
I've heard of the vortices, but it's, you're giving a much better explanation than I ever heard, so.
I can draw it for you later if you like.
Yeah, but in general, again, I would tend to say no, because mostly once the little guys are here, they stay down in the forest. So, but you know the vortices better than I do. Will the vortices kind of drop if they're starting at 50 feet in the air? Will they go down into the forest?
Picture like when the Blue Angels hit the jets and they hit the smoke and you see it. Well, picture a corkscrew of one of those going downwind from each one of these blades, and they can get hundreds of feet wide and are fairly long.
Yeah, and I assume there's some sort of
They dissipate with.
Yeah, they dissipate.
I don't know the distances.
yeah, but because again, that would be absolutely key, because again, 50 feet from the things, heck yeah, I wouldn't doubt if a bird cannot move, a little guy couldn't move there, but again, that's something, sounds like some people should be doing, some physicists should be doing a study there. How far downland does it go?
I was gonna say, I found some on the wind shear and the wind screens created by these back when we were doing the Barrett County one. I'll look and put it out on the site.
Wingtip vortices is the.
But I did not see, I looked at the time too, I did not see very many studies on birds or animals or how it affects,
Yeah, just a start would be something as simple as.
We do know it creates weather change patterns downstream of these turbines.
Yeah, I mean, that's a more severe thing that I ever considered, but I sure don't know the answer. I'll get back to you again.
Yeah, I'm actually in aviation. I'm not a pilot, and I fly a lot, and I have both other seats in the aircraft. And he's exactly right. It's one of the first things you'll learn in aviation is not to take off behind a larger airplane. He's spot on. And who's to say those birds of prey are going to be lining themselves up to fly in between their count. They're going to be flying in every direction.
Yeah.
And they aren't going to see the side of those blades. When it's coming 180 miles an hour to them, so there's a lot of variation in that.
Yes, and again, when you think of just evolving, there was never a threat anything like this. It's just not something any of us beings are used to dealing with. This guy was waiting.
I wonder if I go back to the beginning of the evening, sorry, different topic, but back to the zoning issue. I'm not clear on this, but I went to that meeting at South Range a couple of weeks, about a month ago, and the gentleman was talking about how they zoned in that one. So is there a strategy you have? Is there an attorney actively working to write a zoning ordinance? And is that a referendum or is that a commissioner vote to do that?
I'll try to answer it. So the first thing is we're learning. So like for me as an engineer, I've been kind of asking for like a flow chart, what's step 1, step 2, step 3. So Catherine, you can jump in if you know more than this. So what we've been doing is trying to educate the township boards and supervisors through our attorney and through what we learn, okay, and through the guest speaker. But the townships have their own attorneys. So all we can do is try to help them identify an attorney that will advise them that understands how to properly regulate industrial wind turbines.
Do you have an idea of how you read the commissioners in Stanton Township, where they would be on this? Do you have any feel for where they are at this point? Are they against it, or where are they at?
Well, I would say in 2 months in both townships is that both townships have been nudged a little and have done things that they probably wouldn't have done back in May and June. And partially because they've listened to information that has been fed them. None of them have declared publicly if they're for or against this, but I think the fact, at least in Stanton Township, the supervisor is new. And at the last board meeting, he was able to get a unanimous decision on the moratorium and creation of the planning commission. And I think with this survey he and the board is doing is, I think they're looking to get some backing from residents that the path forward is maybe appropriate. So that's why I said at the very beginning, this survey that we're gonna see tomorrow or next week, I don't know when, it's very important we get not just the 40, 50 of us that have been in this room tonight, we get more people to submit it. So they feel that they have our support, that they can move forward.
Thank you for that.
Yes. Catherine, do you want to add anything about the voting or such?
No, I think that they will respond positively to feedback from their constituents.
And it is important that everybody attend on Wednesday for Adams Township because they are making a decision on whether they're gonna go forward with the moratorium.
And I think the townships are trying to, like Stanton Township's trying to get a feel for what the residents, I mean, they know me, they know Jim, they know, but what do the rest of the residents want? If the rest of the residents don't want wind turbines, then they already created a planning commission or whatever, or planning commission ordinance rather, and then they can go forward. If they don't get the feedback, that's why it's so important. If they don't get the feedback from the residents, that if nobody cares, then we're square one, we've gotta, like Jim said, you gotta, not just these 40 people that are here from Stanton Township, we gotta tell, our neighbors and stuff, and that's why we're gonna, need some help at the fair and go door to door, because a lot of this information, I always feel I'm well informed, and I knew nothing about it until December. Nothing. I heard nothing, and it's been going on for 5 years. And I heard nothing. I thought it was over when Adams Township booted them out, in Wingtip Vortices. So, we've got some work to do. We've got to, remain united and get the information out and tell people what it's gonna do, And not only it's gonna kill birds, it's gonna kill your property values, there's gonna be 60-foot roads out in the woods made of rock. They're clearing 173 acres for roads. That's industrializing commercial forest land. It's just there's all kinds of negatives, and I don't see any positives.
I'd like to say something about the zoning. I know a lot of people have been against zoning in this area, pretty much in the UP, something that we're not used to. We're used to doing our own thing and having however. That's one reason why we asked Kevin to come up and speak, because he's somewhat of an expert in what he likes to call zoning light. And there are ways, once you get the boilerplate, as he calls it, language that's required by the state, that the township can do zoning that's gonna allow us to live the way we've always lived here, but mostly by height restrictions and setbacks to limit the ability of people to put wind turbines in. There's probably nobody in Stanton Township that's ever gonna wanna build a 10-story building.
My barn from all my forties.
Make a variance for your bird tower there. But unless you plan on building something over 100 feet, we put a 100-foot restriction that requires a variance, that's gonna keep the wind turbines out. And it's gonna let everybody continue to do what they want. And we don't care if somebody has a farm-sized wind turbine. I'd like to have one myself. I live on 40 acres where the wind never clips. But I don't want 600-foot turbine anywhere where I have to look at it every day. I live in Toywool on 40 acres. I can see the Donkin Towers from my house 4 or 5 miles away above the tree line. And those are only like 140 feet. That's why I can tell how hard it's snowing. Can you see the tower lights? Nope, okay. You gotta get up early and plow in the morning. I can't imagine what it would be like to look over there and see something that's 600 foot tall. And they're looking at that area. There's ridges all around here. And they've also looked along the shoreline of Lake Superior in the Frida area and north of there. So no place here is safe from that unless we find a way to keep them out, and zoning is probably our best way to do that.
So let's kind of wind down and have 2 or 3 more comments that could be for Joe or for someone else. So Maddie, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, talking about the spinning of those giant blades, and it changes the pressure of the air. And from what I understand, it's actually the lungs of the bats explode from, it's not that they get hit by the blade.
If they're close enough, the wind, I bet your physicist might speak to that.
In fact, Don Jarman, who was in Illinois, right, was he in Illinois? Yeah. He said he witnessed, a friend of his was a helicopter driver. He got sucked into one of the turbines and crashed, and they died because of it sucked them in. So there's so many different things you have to take into consider. The birds would get sucked in, maybe they don't.
Yeah, I don't doubt you get. There's a certain distance, you're done. You know, you don't have to get hit by the blade. You just whatever that distance is. It depends on if you're this big or if you're a helicopter, but. There's a certain distance you gotta.
Joe, I want to ask one thing. You know, you talked about the plumage changes in eagles, and I know that's an aging thing.
Yeah.
So a raptor, like an eagle or an owl, how old does it have to be to reproduce? About. Because they're slow reproducers.
This is I definitely don't know. I think a lot of them, it might even be the first year.
Oh, really?
But I think you're certainly, I can't believe it takes more than 2 or 3. Well, now that I think about it, for eagles, I've never seen or heard of a nesting pair of eagles that don't have the full adult plumage, which takes, I believe, 4 years.
Okay.
But it varies tremendously. Generally, the bigger the bird, the slower. The little guys, the warblers, they breed the first year, no problem. These swans I've been paying attention to, I get the idea they take several years.
And Charlie, but I think the bats, the bats are slow reproducing. So one thing that Eagle and U.S. Fish and Wildlife are concerned is the populations have already been decimated. 85 to 95% are gone because of white nose syndrome, and that the remaining ones reproduce very, very slowly. And so the concern is that the turbines would alter their habitat and also, as Joe used the word, slaughter them.
and that was my next part I was gonna bring up, because I was reading bats have one offspring a year. And, and I also talked to John DeFew, and I told him, we were talking about mines, and I told him, me and her, when we drive by the Duncan Tapiola Road on Highway, about in the fall and the spring, now you can see this mine opening, and I told him about it, he had no idea. Because, there's so many old mines in the UP that, he said, well, if you find any, let me know. So I told him that one, and that the bats are slow reproducing and very few mines, and I was just wondering about the eagles and stuff too, if they're slow reproducing.
Yeah, I didn't know, but when I think about it, you don't see an eagle ever on a nest that isn't got that 4 or might even be 5 year plumage, so yeah.
I have a question for you, Jen. I've been hearing from Kevin that had the other speech a while back, and talk about a map that was shared by the state to the turbine companies, i.e. the areas that don't have zoning. Does anyone have a copy of that? The reason I ask that is I think we all should be, that should be our field work, number one, in all the counties. But number two, being in aviation, one of the things I'm concerned about is aviation. Okay, you talk about a lot of times. I really don't know the numbers of stats. I have not done any personal research on it. However, I fly regularly 1,000 to 2,000 feet all over the Upper Peninsula, east to west, north to south, constantly. So I'd like to look into that a little bit, and that map I think would be helpful. I would probably target those areas to see, to look into those areas.
So first thing, you did put the map on our website.
You did, okay.
So if you go on our website, there's an issue like, why are they here?
Okay.
And so I have the map, but I can also send it to you, the report. And I would just like to clarify, the map was created by the state, and they say the map is useful for counties, townships, and developers.
Right.
Okay, so they did say that they made the map for lots of people,
I understand.
that you could kind of understand a little bit where you stood locally in terms of regulating industrial wind turbines. But from we understand, one of the great uses, the users of the map are wind developers, not the local townships. But it's on our website, but I'll share the report that it does.
Wasn't it like 500 or so the turbines they thought could go in Houghton County?
There's another study from 2009 that Michigan State did where they assessed the potential for industrial wind development in Houghton and Keweenaw County, and it identifies hundreds and hundreds of potential turbines could be placed there.
3,827.
I talked to the woman that did that study. It's slightly outdated now because that's when the turbines were only 300 feet tall. So they wouldn't be able to place them as close together. So that might cut the number down some, but there's still potential for thousands of sites in Houghton and Keweenaw County.
Okay, so we'll take two more comments over here, and then we'll kind of do things in form.
I got a question here. I've been sitting here since 6:30. Now, we're talking about all the birds and all these wind turbines and all. But you know what we're missing here? All of you better pay attention to what I'm saying. I live, and I made this comment a week ago or so in Adams Township down hall. It's ridiculous that we're talking about birds. I understand, I love the birds and these wind turbines, but you know what the cost is? I moved here, my wife and I, our family moved from California to here. And I'll tell you what it cost us in my 30 years, my wife had to pay taxes on the cost. The cost was that the electrical, our energy, electricity, all was going to be reduced. Everything was going to drop because of these wind turbines. Okay? And then on top of that, they said it really would cut the cost. Now, what I want to know is Are you folks interested, our homeowners, aren't you interested in not having increased costs on property tax? We were raised 2.5% over a period of 30 years. And I think it's a shame that we're talking about all what the damaged wind turbines are doing. Our cost is gonna cost taxpayers money. Why don't we talk about that, and why don't you use that as a talking point? And I'll tell you something.
I'm right on with you, and so if you go to so the first thing is you go to our website, we have 12 issues there now.
I understand that, but you know, excuse me, I wanna get to the bottom line here. I'm sitting here, because I already heard all what we're talking about wind turbines. But I'll tell you one thing, I lived in that 30 years of that. And I know what it costs my wife and I, and paid our taxes on our property. More the property you got, the more cost it's gonna have that you're gonna pay the state. State of California is a money grabbing state. And half my family have moved out of California and moved to Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada and everywhere else to avoid the taxes. Now, I love it here where I live. I love Adams Townships where I live. It's paradise for my wife and I and our kids. And when you figure the cost, it's gonna cost us. And, you know, it's ridiculous. And 2.5% might not be much money for you to pay, but I don't feel that we need no increase of anything else that's going on.
So I think you bring up.
My point is this, money talks in my billfold. I wanna know when I'm controlling my billfold, the money I gotta pay out of my taxes. And I'll be darned if I'm ever gonna sit back here and listen, oh, we're talking about killing the birds. I love birds. But you know something, let's get down to the cost of what it's gonna cost to maintain these wind turbines. And when these wind turbines are put up, you know who pays for it? The taxpayer pays for it. And it's coming out of your billboard, it's coming out of mine. So if you want to see that, why don't you use that as some of your format of what conversation we need to have, okay?
And I agree with you, and so I think that's a good idea for our next public meeting.
But I think that's when you got it went, you should be pushing that, and that board over there, I've known every one of those board members over there. But I'll tell you one thing, I like to live in comfort. And I'll tell you, I've traveled for many, many years, country to country to country. I want to enjoy my life when I'm retired. I'm darned if I'm going to give the state and these corporations all that big money to put them in here, and then I have to pay the bill. You've got to pay the bill. And I'm just telling you, but I'm sorry, I sat here long enough, you know, we're talking about all the birds and all that, that's fine. But, you know, let's get to the point of cost, money. That's my story today, I'm sorry folks, but I'm mad, you know, but that's what I'm doing. Right on. We're all right on.
Yeah, we got a lot of them.
Okay, that was a really great way to end the talk, thank you. And that ends our program. Some focus, we need to focus on township hub and our neighbors. So let's take some time, there's refreshments there, there's sign-up sheets, there's sign-up. Let's get going. Thank you for coming, thank you.
Smile, Gary, you're on camera.